Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to pivot away from Xpona coverage for a minute. I do have a little bit more to share with you that's in the Xpona realm. I told you I would come back and based on songs I heard at the show and gear I heard, if I heard anything in a particular song that I really liked, that I thought, man, that may be something I like better than what I have at home in a certain part of a song. I kind of now know with DSP and a lot of experience, hours and hours, years and years, how I can kind of maneuver things and see if I can tweak things to achieve that sound that I heard. And then the trade-off, though, oftentimes when this happens is you can improve one song by doing these little tweaks, but then it impacts another song that was mastered differently in a worse way. So it's always a fun exercise, though, to try to do that. And what I'm going to plan to do is do that with a particular song at my chair and walk you through it and show you how it works positively and negatively. So that'll be a fun thing. But for now, I wanted to pivot to more of a reasonable budget system, something that's kind of different than you saw at Xpona, where almost every room was 6 figures plus, and that's just in cables. But I did feature some good budget rooms at the show, and it's very encouraging that a lot of these budget rooms impress people and got the most wows. So there are a lot of brands that make high quality products. Now, the other side of the coin, though, is that especially with this Tekton double impact that I'm going to review today, sometimes you get a lot of hyperbole too. And so my whole thing here is to kind of dissect through what's real, what's hyperbole, and give you kind of a straight shoot of my impression of the Tekton and the HiFi Rose integrated amp streamer, which gets 50 watts per channel and drove the Tektons in this cursory review. And just to kind of give you, again, I emphasize cursory because I didn't spend weeks with it. I didn't bring them in my home. I didn't do a lot of different setup. And in fact, for this particular purpose, I used the Rose Tube material, all stuff from YouTube on the HiFi Rose streamer. They call it Rose Tube. But I chose tracks that I know very well because I play them on mine, and ones that are better than what's on streaming in many cases. In fact, the You Learn version I play for you from YouTube with Liz Stanley and Alanis Morissette is 10 times better than the streaming version. So sometimes people worry about, oh, YouTube isn't Flac, it isn't high res, it isn't this. Trust me, what's more important is how something is mastered, mic'd, and the artist's performance. Those things all trump whether it's Flac or MP3, MP4, whatever you want to nitpick. Quite frankly, YouTube videos and MP3 quality versus Flac quality is hard to tell in a lot of cases. It's mainly just if you have really young ears and you can hear stuff over maybe 16,000 hertz. There is maybe a little steeper roll off with MP3s. And so wide bandwidth instruments, maybe a snare drum or something like that, you may be able to hear the difference. But like I said, the delta between MP3 and Flacs, and quite frankly, even if people are listening to Flacs for streaming, usually they're not lossless because they're doing either DSP, headroom management, upsample, all kinds of other things as well. So getting neurotic about those numbers and resolution is secondary. I'm not saying it's not important at all, but it's secondary to mastering, miking, and the performance of the artist. So that's what I did today, is focus on those two things in a very cursory level to give you my impressions. Now, I have heard Tektons at the show, but I don't feel like that's enough to give a categoric conclusion. This allowed me to at least spend some dedicated time, tracks I know, in a room I know pretty well at 3MA, and kind of just get a feel for how it performed in that room with the HiFi Rose streamer. And let me give a thumbs up, first of all, to the HiFi Rose streamer. Everything to date that I've encountered with it at shows was impressive, just from a visual and aesthetic, and all the app and everything I saw about it, the different displays. looked like it was a top-notch product. This was the first time I got to really sit down and listen to it, and I also got a chance to use the app on the iPad, and it's definitely an improvement over like the RRender app, which I'm not a big fan of. This app was much more intuitive. I didn't have to fish around or find out what the difference between title, Koba, streaming, albums, artists versus, all the things that it was very intuitive. So thumbs up on the HiFi Rose, and it drove the Tektons really well. I didn't really push it, and I'm not saying 50 watts is going to be adequate for everybody, but that HiFi Rose, if you've got that, and I think it's around $2,200, wow. I mean, I would not be embarrassed to have that as my part of my system. In a budget level system, you're going to be hard pressed to do better. I'd like to see how well it would drive Maggies, because Maggies are going to be kind of the counterpoint to the Tektons. Because here's the deal with the Tektons. I think they're a good speaker. I think the hoopla and the hyperbole, like somebody, I don't know if it was this model, I don't think it was, but say, oh, the Tektons are competitive with the Wilson Max or whatever he said. No, I mean, let's be realistic here. But they're not nearly as expensive. So where the rubber hits the road is, how close are you getting to ultimate performance with the Tektons? And for me, it was always a case when I'm listening to them is, hey, pretty good. And then I'd hear something, okay, now I know the budget it was designed for. And I will say this, though, one thing that just kept the most common negative, let me get that out the way. For me, as I've mentioned many times on the channel, having hid my bias for not really liking point source box speakers based on all I've owned and listened to over the years, because I feel like Pistonic drivers and that point source configuration oftentimes shouts the music at me. And most of the time it's because the drivers aren't blended that well, and the crossover isn't great. So there are great box speakers, the Estelons, the YGs, the Rockports, the Magicos, the Wilsons. Those are all ones in the box speaker realm that I would consider owning, because they do mitigate a lot of the issues that I find with box speakers. Now, did the Tektons mitigate those issues? In some respects, they mitigated the issue I thought I would have with the tweeter array, and thinking that that wouldn't be pleasing. At least in the sweet spot, I found it fine, if not a little bit of a plus compared to other budget speakers in that realm. I thought it was very pleasing on certain songs, and I'm going to play for you in the next video certain songs where I think it excelled, and then certain songs where I think it exposed more of the budget range it was built for. Where I think the major deficiency for me in terms of comparing it to ultimate performance, again, taking budget out of the equation, is that I did feel like there was a cabinet feel to the sound. Not so much a total like PA speaker sound, but I just felt like I was hearing the cabinet and the porting a little bit more than I hear with like other great cost no object point source box speakers. So that's understandable, but I almost kept wondering, I was like, man, I kind of wish he would separate the MTM, well, in this case, it was MTTTTTTM portion of the speaker from the bass module, so that they would each have their own cabinets, and then maybe the resonances or the boxy side of certain things I heard, or maybe the more one-note bass. I think the bass was very nice and taut, punchy, and really, for a lot of people's taste, this speaker could be endgame, especially with, certain types of music and certain rooms. And like I said, taste, there are elements that I can see where people are very high on it. For me, the only deal breaker when I would compare it, if I'm going to compare it to other budget models, is that the major weakness, I think, is I did hear a box coloration to maybe the bass being a little more one note than I'm used to with the very best. Or if you did, let's say, a great satellite, or even the Polk bookshelves, and then a separate sub, there is potential there to get a higher ceiling if you made them right, you placed the sub right, crossover things right. I think that would be a tough call for me which one I would do in that budget range, because you could probably do both in that same budget range. But again, this is a speaker I think you have to audition. And in a lot of ways, I'm not saying it's the equivalent of clips, but clips to horns, you know, they don't run away from the horn side. They put them in the corner. They embrace the horn nature, and it's a fun speaker, bold, and has its flavor, and they're unapologetic about it, and people gravitate to it. In some ways, Tekton is the equivalent of a point source box. Hey, we're going to give you a point source box. We're going to give you cool punchy bass that's full range. We're going to give you nice tweeter array that it makes the top end is actually pretty clean and clear. And so you're going to get a hi-fi sound, absent maybe some colorations due to budgetary concerns. I mean, this isn't Rockport level cabinet construction, and I don't know how much bracing is in it. And I don't know if the crossover parts are, you know, the ultimate end. Same thing with the drivers, but within the realm of selling direct and how many drivers you do get and how much you do get for the money, a full range speaker, I could see where that paired with the HiFi Rose, some people are going to listen to that and say, that's all I need. That's the best I've heard, you know, with, depending on your level of experience, it could be all you like. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's not all about what my preference is anyway. I mean, I've actually done DSP bass to get it more flat and ruler flat and accurate, but then we'll turn it on and off. And there are some people that like it better with big peaks, you know. So sometimes our preferences and tastes are different. And so that's why, you know, everybody online, there are some that go overboard with the hyperbole with some of these reviews, and they all think they're experts, and they are. That's the ironic thing. They all are experts for their tastes. Now, whether that translates to you or not, that's where you need to hear people's advice, hear people's reviews, like what I'm saying, and then go listen to yourself and say, okay, who talked about this speaker that aligns with what I heard? And then follow their advice in the future if you can't listen for yourself. This is a speaker I genuinely think, though, you want to listen to it first before you buy, or make sure there's I think they sell direct. So, well, if you could go to 3MA, they have a used pair right now, trade-in. So if you can find one of those or somebody that has one, I would listen to it first to make sure that it's your taste and you can deal with the trade-offs for the budget and whatnot. But I feel comfortable saying a lot of people will like it. Not everybody. There's going to be some that they'll hear a Maggie in that same price point or even less and a sub, and they'll say, that's what I want, you know. And I might find myself probably in that bucket, but I can definitely appreciate the taste that say the opposite. It's not always about, that's one thing is challenging for me to always keep in mind. My preferences, I can't let that color what I'm giving as advice or a review, because, you know, I can't say, oh, I don't like horns, and I don't like open baffle, I don't like omnidirectional, I don't like, you know, I can't, I've got to appreciate the fact that we haven't built the perfect speaker yet. So what we have to do is analyze what each speaker design kind of specializes in and what the trade-offs are, and see how that speaker mitigates the trade-offs the best and accentuates the positives. And I think Tekton, for its what it accentuated was the top end. They did a really good job with that tweeter array. That surprised me, at least in the sweet spot where I was sitting. And in this example, if I spend more time in the future and have more, I'll expand on this review. But I wanted to give you this initial feedback and also some music clips so you can kind of hear for yourself as best as possible through the recording how it did with one song versus the other. And as well, I'm going to give you some tracks where having the Rose Tube YouTube on your streamer again pays off big, especially with this You Learn track, cover track. Well, it's not really a cover because Alanis Morissette is in it too with Liz Stanley. So why don't you go ahead and I'll link it at the end of this video. Sign up, subscribe, and I'll see you back here soon.